Hey guys, it's 24 hours later. Should we see what this stuff looks like? Like I said before, it's been sitting in the bucket for about 24 hours. Right now, what I expect to see when I open the bucket is the rust will be neutralized and gone. This particular vise, since it has a little bit of the chrome plating peeling off, the chrome plating is going to look kind of pitted. We're going to fix that by going over to either an angle grinder with a Scotch-Brite wheel or a angle grinder or a bench grinder with a wire wheel and take off some of that stuff. Later on, depending on how it looks, I may actually take it over to the large shop and do some bead blasting on it to just kind of remove all that chrome plating. But many of you don't have those type of tools, so I'm going to try and stick to the tools that most people may have in their own shop, like a bench grinder or something like that. Also, probably pull this thing out and put it back together and be just fine with a little bit of lubrication. So there are a whole lot of other options. I'm going to go a little bit farther than some people may have, just because I kind of want to get all that chrome plated flakes off of this guy. I expect it to be on there, just because I've done these type before, and I've noticed that when the rust is gone, the chrome plating still kind of flakes up and it feels like rust. So let's take a look. All right, so we'll open the lid here, pull this stuff out. And then what I typically do after it comes out of this, I'm going to lay it in the concrete, hose it off, get all the kind of residue and whatnot. And then we'll start looking at each of the parts and kind of compare what they look like from when we put them in to when we're taking them out. All right, let's get this sprayed off. Okay, you can see some of the shiny, looks like rust, but it's just pitting. That's the chrome plating coming off like I was talking about. So he looks a lot cleaner. I may need to scrub some of that other stuff off, but we're going to take a wire wheel to this anyway, and that's going to look much nicer once that's done. Remember what that top looked like. There's our bottom. Kind of looks much cleaner. Lay that down. Here's our jaws. Here's our other jaw. I'll just smudge some of that stuff away. Like I said, we're going to take a wire wheel to this, so it's going to take away some of that leftover oxide. There's our top jaws. There's our other one. Sometimes you'll have a little black oxide layer left over. It usually comes right off. There's our key. Remember how rusty that was. And then the rest of our parts. There's our screw. We've got some residual stuff in there. We'll get off with the wire wheel. But yeah, so nice and clean. And then all we got to do now is take it over to wire wheel and help kind of get some of the other chrome plating off. Okay, so I'm sitting in front of a bench grinder. I'll show you what that looks like. Basically this guy here. So got a wire wheel on it. Eventually, if you had it, you could use an angle grinder with a wire brush or a Scotch-Brite. That would work equally as well. This is going to be loud on the microphone, so I'll probably end up cutting out the audio, playing some music over it, but I'm going to spend some time with some safety glasses in front of the bench grinder here, and I'm going to take off some of that rust stuff. Essentially, when you're using something like this, you want to make sure that you're protecting your eyes, because these little wire things can shoot off at you, and you don't want that. The other thing is, if you are looking for one of these, they can be easily found at like Lowe's, Home Depot, hardware store, and usually you can find them for right around $100 or less. They're nice because the hard wheel can be used for touching up tools. You can use them for resharpening or reshaping gravers. Well, maybe we'll do a video on that later on, but so that's what I'm going to be doing. So we're going to go ahead and cut to a time lapse, throw some music over it, and let you guys see this process. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do now that I've got them all wire wheeled off is I'm going to make sure everything's nice and dried off, because I did spray them with the hose. I'm going to add a light lubrication to the outside of it. Typically I'll use this, if you can find it. It's called Super Slick Stuff, and it is an anti-rust material and works well for a lot of stuff like that. So if you're looking for a product that works for keeping rust away and lubricating a surface, I really like this stuff. It's Super Slick Stuff is the name of it. So yeah, if you can, take a look out for that. I'm gonna just rub everything down, and then we'll head back into the shop. We'll add some leather conditioner to the base, and then we'll put this vise back together and see what it looks like all cleaned up. All right, first thing we're gonna do is condition this leather base. I have Aussie's leather conditioner. I use this for when I make sheaths and knives and stuff like that. I'm just gonna take a little on my finger, wipe it on the leather inside of this base, and give it a little bit more love. This just adds a little bit of moisture to the leather, conditions it up a little bit, and looking like brand new. It looks like somebody had a lot of either dye or looks like rouge or something on this, because my hands are now pretty nasty. We'll get those wiped off before we put the vise back together, but so far have that soak in a little bit, and this will be ready to be just like new. Okay, for putting the vise together, I'm going to try and do a nice top view, let you guys see what's happening. We'll grab the bottom, which I'll just put on the base to hold it. And then we're going to take our bearing that I put some bearing grease in already. I want to make sure that top part's facing up. That's going to be the thrusting downward part. So we'll just drop him in. And then for good cause, I'm going to use white lithium grease, just as a little extra love. On the top here, have that down in the hole. Remember, that's a nice compression fit, so the grease that's in there is going to get onto that peg and help it kind of rotate. Next, we got our top part. See how much nicer that looks. Here's how much nicer the bottom part looks. And then we're just going to drop him in. Make sure it rotates nice and smooth. And then the next thing we're going to do is insert our cradle for that screw. And I didn't realize it because it was so nasty. That screw is actually brass. When it came out of the evaporust, this entire part is brass, which makes sense because the brass acts, or brass or bronze acts a nice lubrication to the surface of steel. And interesting. Is that not working? So interesting part was that screw is not going down in there. I wonder if this screw is part of another project. Let's find out. Found it. It was at the bottom of the bucket. So I already got him in there. It fell through that little mesh part of the bucket and was in the very bottom. So now we'll take our screw. Remember what that looked like before. Nice now. And then what I'm going to end up doing is actually spraying the inside of this area and the screw with the white lithium grease. If you have another type of lubricant, that works. I do not recommend WD-40. This, as you can see, leaves a nice white film behind, and it helps lubricate the threads as you're using it. I can spray some on the inside because this has a channel right here, like a T, like a little dovetail T channel that your vise jaws fit in, and so you want to make sure that area is lubed up as well. And then it doesn't hurt to get some on the top too. Okay, so now is kind of a little bit tricky, but it should be fine. We're going to get the two jaws and we're going to place them on the ends here, and then we're going to turn the screw to have them both indexed and moved together. If you don't have them indexed, one jaw will reach the end while the other jaw is out over here, and you can't close them up any further. So you want to make sure they're indexed while they turn. And the best way to do that is remember that one of these is a left-hand thread, the other is a right-hand thread. So figuring out which jaw you need on which side is also very important. Let's see if I can get this right the first time. I'm going to basically hold them in like that. I'll take the key and I'll see if... So as I turn it this way, I can feel the jaws moving outward. So what I'm going to do is see if this helps to switch these jaws. It doesn't help, so I'm going to go the opposite direction. Okay, now if I switch them and go the opposite direction and it still doesn't work, then I know that I have the right hand and the left hand thread on the wrong side, which I did. So now we're going to do the same thing. We'll hold these so they both index, and then we'll turn it, and here they go. Nice and smooth, and they both index and meet right in the middle. So we're going to open this up a little bit, and then we're going to drop our top jaws in place. And now we have an almost finished refurb of the vise. What we need to do now is measure this hole, and we're going to make a peg that will fit down in there and stop this from rotating if we wanted to do that. So let me grab my calipers, and we will measure the inside of this hole. I'm going to do inches. I'll zero my calipers and then measure the inside dimension. And it's 0.25. So let me find a rod that size and I can insert it in there and we can see if it works. So I found a 0.25 diameter rod. What I'll end up doing later on is cutting this down to length. I'll insert it into that hole, mark it, and then now that it's in both of those holes, this vise doesn't rotate. So I'd cut that short and then probably bend over the end so that I can create just a stop post and be able to pull it straight out. You do want to make sure you use steel, like stainless steel or another type of steel. I don't like using aluminum or copper or brass or anything like that in those because they do deform a little bit. So you might get it caught and stuck. Steel's nice because it is nice and hard and you won't deform it. So that's how I'll end up making that. I won't bother you with how I do that. I'm basically going to cut it with a hacksaw, bend it over, maybe heat it up and bend it over. Just it's a little easier to work with steels that way. And then I'll have a nice stop for this vise. There you go. So that's basically it. How to clean up a vise. Now for the price of the vise, right around $300. Having a bucket of evaporust around your shop is not a bad thing to have around. That's an additional cost. If you don't already have a bench grinder, it's a nice addition, nice tool to have in the shop. If you do, and the vise isn't super rusty like this, you can use some sandpaper, some Scotch-Brite, something like that, and just kind of take any of the chrome plating that might be kind of taken off, or any of the extra dirt and grime. And yeah, so for things you probably already have in your shop, sandpaper, Scotch-Brite, it doesn't take a whole lot to be able to turn a $300 vise into an $800 vise with a little bit of care. I know with the rising costs right now, all that kind of economic uncertainty, we want to continue doing what we're doing. Sometimes you have to find price-saving methods in order to do that. So used ball vises off eBay, not a bad place to start. There are other alternatives that maybe we'll touch on for work holding other than a ball vise. But for now, that's today. So if you guys like a little tutorials on how to clean, take apart, and refurbish old tools, hit subscribe. I'd like to do this a little bit more often and do it with some other vintage jewelry tools that I find along the way. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you guys soon.